Remember, Sam Wheat from Ghost said, the love you have inside, you take it with you. And when we really truly understand that we take it with us, then we can look at our grieving process very, very differently. We can look at the grieving process as something that takes us to a state of gratitude that we had the chance to love that person and we had that person loving us. Hi, I'm Angelique Letizia, a writer, director, and creator of the 𝐾𝐭 method. It's a tool to shift your frequency, rewrite your inner script, and realign you with the energy of your highest potential. This podcast is your behind-the-scenes pass to alchemizing that energy. So if you're ready to interrupt the script, reclaim your power, and write your story that you were actually born to live, you're in the right place. Hi, friends. Welcome back to 𝐾𝐭 with Angelique. I'm Angelique, and today we're going to talk about grief. It's interesting because this wasn't really a topic that I was going to cover anytime soon, but they say man plans and God laughs. And with that, I had a friend taken from my life earlier this week in a tragic way. He was 37 years old and passed away quite unexpectedly. This was a friend not only of mine, but of several other friends of mine who have been left devastated, as you can imagine. And it got me to thinking about the nature of grief, because grief is something a lot of people don't understand. It's something many of us judge, not only others, but ourselves. And it comes with a lot of pain. And sometimes pain that we don't understand. And so today we're going to go through it a little bit and see if we can shed some light on grief and perhaps offer a different perspective on it and how to help you kind of move past it, but not in a way that you eliminate it, because truthfully, grief can't be eliminated. It has to be integrated and elevated. And that is what we are going to talk about today. And I want to open this with my own story past my friend, because I am somebody who has dealt with a lot of grief in my life. One of the major events that happened in my life was the death of my stepsister. And the impact of that is still felt very much to this day. And this happened in 1992. And here I am in 2025. And I can tell you that I still think about her. I still have my moments where I can burst out into tears. But another thing has happened over time, and that is the understanding of what grief actually is, which ultimately is love that gets trapped and has nowhere to go. Grief is interesting because it demonstrates on a very high level that we have loved someone with all of our hearts, so much so that the very thought of not having them in our physical reality anymore quite literally breaks our hearts. And we feel this heaviness, we feel a sadness, we feel an anger, we feel all different kinds of emotions, especially depending on how that person passed. So my story begins with my stepsister, who was 21 years old, who had gone to a wedding with her boyfriend and another couple. And on the way home from that wedding, the boyfriend happened to be slightly inebriated and got behind the wheel. And in doing so, as they were making their way home, he misjudged a turn, hit an embankment, and the car went over into a ravine. Now, interestingly enough, everyone else in the car survived except my sister. And that's because she wasn't wearing her seatbelt. And usually she would sit in the front, but this particular time she sat in the back. And the force of the car actually threw her body out the back window. And this was one of those 1990 Mustangs, when Mustang changed the body. So it was either 90 or 91. and they had those very, very small back windows. And she was petite. She was very small and very skinny. And yet she flew out the back window and she got caught, like her torso. So her legs were still in the car and the upper part of her body was out. And she may have lived, except the car ended up flipping over and she ended up landing face down and died in 6 inches of water. So she drowned in 6 inches of water. I remember the following day, my brother and I are in the kitchen in the 𝐬𝐻𝐾𝐭 house, and we were making blueberry waffles. And it's really amazing how you can actually smell, where you were. The senses are so incredible that way. Here we are in the kitchen, and the doorbell rings. And I remember going around the corner, and I look, and I see my stepfather jet toward the front door. And through the glass, I can see police and a priest. And I ran back in the kitchen and I said to my brother, there's the priest and the police are at the front door. And my brother just immediately starts to cry. And he says, something is wrong. Something is wrong. And I said, no, everything's okay. I hear my stepfather say, thank you. He closes the door and he comes into the kitchen. Now, by this time, these waffles are burning. Eggo blueberry waffles, right? Burning. And my stepfather comes in and he comes down to eye level with me and my brother and he says, your sister Jennifer was in a car accident last night and was killed. Well, to this day, I can't really get that sentence out without still getting choked up. That set off a whole range of emotions. And I was 12 years old at the time. And the understanding of grief beyond losing a grandparent when I was 5 and couldn't really remember it, outside of, the abandonment of a father, which is a different kind of grief. This one hit differently. This one I couldn't really understand. Now, why I bring up this story is because throughout my life, my stepsister's death has played a very interesting role in the sense that many, many times I have had what could be called as God winks or messages or signs that she was still with me. But we're going to get to that because that's the last part of this. The first part of this is really dissecting grief, okay? Because whenever we lose someone that we love, there are what I call sheddings, okay? And the first shedding is accepting that this person is no longer in the physical realm, meaning we can no longer hear their voice. We can no longer feel the comfort of their touch. We can no longer see them. This is a really, really tough part, okay? That transition from matter to spirit is hard when we don't really understand the dynamics of it or the physics of it. We think of death as being the end. And because of that, our hearts quite literally break open because we know we're not going to see that person again, not in the physical form. That is the first shedding that we need to do, is the idea that this person is no longer going to be in our lives in that way. And that is probably, I feel, the most difficult step, is understanding that we have to keep going on without having them physically present. The second is nostalgia. And what I mean by that is, if you have had someone in your life long enough, then they have done things with you in your life. Restaurants, movies, songs, places that you've traveled. All of those moments and experiences carry an energetic signature and imprint. I often say, if we could see the simultaneous nature of the quantum field, we would actually be able to see ourselves moving through in all different times, right? We would see ourselves 20 years ago walking down the street. We would see ourselves 20 years from now walking down the street. We would have this almost trippy sort of experience where we could experience all of it simultaneously, but that's not how it works here in the physical realm. And so we have this nostalgia, and nostalgia can trigger the grief. Nostalgia can trigger a lot of things. It can trigger joy. It can trigger sadness. It could trigger a longing. And all of those things are absolutely acceptable because everyone grieves differently, and they grieve for different amounts of time, and they grieve for different reasons because people impact us differently. People, and even within impacting us differently, a mother or a father or a sibling or an aunt or an uncle, there's all different kinds of grief, and how you have that attachment is dependent upon what the relationship was with that person, what they meant to you. So there is a compassion point that we have to have for people who are grieving, and not to judge the way they choose to grieve, because the way they choose to grieve may not be the way you choose to grieve. Some people like to be distracted. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it. They just want to get on with it. Some people like to sit in it. Some people need to sit in it. They need to be with it. Some people need to have a combination where they have moments where they're sitting with it and moments where they're moving out of it. Whatever it is, and for however long it takes, there are no hard, fast rules. And again, this is my opinion, so there may be people who disagree, but from my experience, there are no hard, fast rules in how long and how somebody grieves another person or the loss of another person. The third shedding point is the understanding of death. Now, this is going to be a tough one for people because here's another situation where people are going to have different ideas on what death is. There are those who believe that death is final. You die, you leave the body, that's it, it's lights out, goodbye. There are those who believe in reincarnation, that you die, you go back into some cycle where you turn around and you come back. There are those who believe that the spirits of their loved ones as ancestors are always with them. There are those who believe that the spirit turns into an angel. Whatever you believe, I will say this. Energy can be neither created nor destroyed. It can only be transformed. And we are energy. We are dense energy when we are in this form, and we are a lighter form when we are in our spirit form, which is why we are more ethereal and we don't have skin and blood and bone. The atoms vibrate at a much lower vibration when we are in the state of matter, and that is why we have this denser body. As we elevate, we start to vibrate at a higher level. And that higher level, if you can see, my fingers are going super fast for those who aren't watching. You almost can't see part of the fingers, right? Because they're moving so quickly, they almost become translucent. This is because, again, the higher the vibration, the less visibility we have in this particular sphere. Now, what is all of this leading to, Angelique? Well, this is leading to the idea that when we understand that our loved ones cross over and they transform into this spirit state, then we can also understand that they don't really leave us. There is this beautiful energetic connection that stays with the heart. One of my favorite movies of all time is Ghost. And one of the most beautiful parts was when he says at the end, the love inside, you take it with you. And this is true because love is the language of the universe. It is the most powerful energy, and it is what we all come from. It is what the source actually is. You see, the universe is primarily good. It has a very good energy. And we learn about this good through both sides of the polarity spectrum. And grief actually is in that. It's on the negative side of the polarity spectrum because we have to experience that loss. But what we do with it is the magic, is the key. How we alchemize that energy and make it into something that can elevate our experience instead of take us down into the depths of despair is really the key. So here's what we need to understand. The spirit of our ancestors is all around us. If you were listening to a podcast I did a couple of weeks ago with Roderick Jefferson, he talks about dying on the table. And he died of a stroke and watched them from the corner of the room trying to resuscitate him. His spirit never left the room, it was up in the corner. And if you've ever researched NDEs, near-death experiences, you would understand that this is a phenomenon that many, many people have experienced. They've done everything from meeting Jesus to their ancestors to being told it wasn't time and they had to come back. And the reason I bring this up is to understand that if that energy, that soul, that spirit that we have continues on, so when our loved ones passed on, they don't really leave us, they transform. So the energy is no longer dense in a physical form, but it is still very much alive. Now, I wrap this around to my sister because many, many times in my journey, man, did she come through in so many different scenarios. And I'll give you a couple of them. When I was getting married, I was really sad that my uncle Carlo, who had passed, and my stepsister, Jen, were not going to be at my wedding. And I was so hung up on this. And my best friend is driving me to the wedding. And she said to me, "But you know how this works. You believe in angels and you believe that the spirit goes on. You know how this works. You know they're going to be there. You just can't see them, but they're going to be there." But for some reason, I don't know whether it was just the emotions of everything and the idea of getting married. I couldn't get past the idea that they weren't going to be there. So I start to give myself a migraine. I'm notorious for this. She pulls over in a gas station and she gets out to go get me a Coke and to get herself a Diet Coke and to get me some Advil. She comes back, gets in the car. By this time, I am weepy. She said, "Ange, you're just overwhelmed. Why don't you take something, drink the Coke, take the Advil, and let's just chill out, and we'll be there soon." So I did. I reach into the bag. I pull the Coke out. I go to open it and I gasp. And it says, "Share a Coke with Jennifer." Jennifer is my stepsister's name. I can't tell you the chills that were up and down my body. Steph, same thing. She's like, "Oh." And right in that moment, we both started to cry. Now, interestingly enough, Stephanie was supposed to be called Jennifer. She was supposed to be named Jennifer Jo. And when we became friends, we had an incident where I was in the hospital. She came to the hospital with me. And we were really new friends at this time. I mean, really new. So she didn't know that much about me. I didn't know that much about her. But she came because she's always been a great friend from the very first day I met her. Steph is sitting in the waiting room, and at some point, this name comes over the intercom. She gets up, she goes over to the desk, and they say, "Jennifer?" And Steph says, "Yes." And they said, "Your sister, Angelique, is ready." So Steph had no idea who this Jennifer was. She went back home to her grandmother and her nonna, and she was asking them questions, who in our family is Jennifer, who in our family is Jennifer, because she found it very strange. And she finally came to me with it, a few days later to tell me her experience, after I'd healed and, I was in better spirits to be receiving this kind of message. And she said, the funniest thing happened in the hospital. And she proceeds to tell me the story. And I mean, I must have gone white. And she said, so do you know who Jennifer is? And I said, yeah, Jennifer's my sister. From that moment, I knew that my stepsister brought this girl into my life. And my God, has she been my sister in this world? I will tell you, from the day I met this girl, she has not just been my friend. She has been my family. She has been my protector. She has been the absolute best friend I have ever had in my life. And I know that my sister's spirit brought her to me. I tell you this, friends, because there are many times when people that we love have crossed over that we receive signs. Music is a big one. How many times that you've been in the car and you've heard a song and you're like, whoa, that song was the song. Or, you see a sign with that person's name, or something pops up on your phone. These are little God winks, little messages from spirit being like, hey, I'm still here. I'm still with you. Now, all of this on some level can terrify some people, like my mother. This stuff terrifies my mother. My mother is not like me. And then others can be comforted by it. I would encourage anyone who is grieving to take in the idea that when we are in a state of grief, we are in that state of loss, of despair, which is a lower vibrational energy. It does bring our energy down. As we start to work through that, we start to elevate and alchemize that energy back to its original form, which is love. Now, here's the strangest part, and this is what I had to do in order to get myself at some point in my life to not break down into sobbing hysterics every time I thought of my sister, because let's be honest, I was going to think about this woman for the rest of my life. This wasn't going to be just, oh, that happened and chow chow brown cow. This means that for the rest of my time on earth, there was going to be times that I was going to think about her. How I reacted to that was going to determine whether I was in despair or whether I was in a state of joy, gratitude, and appreciation. Because what you start to realize is that you loved somebody so much, and that person must have loved you because, man, you feel that emptiness in your life without them. That kind of love transcends. Remember, Sam Wheat from Ghost said, the love you have inside, you take it with you. And when we really truly understand that we take it with us, then we can look at our grieving process very, very differently. We can look at the grieving process as something that takes us to a state of gratitude, that we had the chance to love that person and we had that person loving us. And that is a beautiful gift when we can sit in that energy and really know that whatever happens, even if we cry, even if we have that moment of sadness, because again, we have to accept that we can't see, touch, hear, or feel them in this reality. We don't lose the way they made us feel in our hearts. We know their energy. We know when they're in the room with us. We can feel it. This is one of the reasons I tell people all the time, really get good at discerning energy. If you practice anything in your life, practice energy mastery, mastering your own and mastering the feeling you get from another person. Think about this, your lover, your sibling, your child, you know how they feel. You know their energy. If you really sit and think about it, you know that energy. You walk into a room, you'll know if they're there. that doesn't change. That energetic signature stays with that person, that entity, that spirit, well beyond the shedding of the physical body. When we fully understand that we are energy, then grief can become a doorway, a connection point. If we deny to ourselves that our loved ones moved on and we believe that they are gone, then we won't be able to connect with their spirit because we have created a reality, a belief. And I talk about the power of belief in the previous podcast episode. We create a belief, and that belief then creates a veil. And when that veil goes up, no matter how hard your ancestors try to get through, they can't penetrate that wall. But when we understand that they aren't gone, when our faith becomes bigger than our fear, when our belief that all is one and we never really die, we only transform, when that becomes the forefront of our faith and our belief, we connect beyond the realm of time, and time is just a construct, right? If you look for the signs, you're going to find them, right? If you remember that there can be connection, that you aren't disconnected from your loved one, you're just one thought away. You're just one sign away. Look for those signs. My sister used to listen to The Joker by Steve Miller Band. And I remember sitting in a Starbucks and they were playing jazz music, which I love. I absolutely adore jazz music. And I was feeling horrible that day. I remember thinking terrible thoughts. And I sat there crying at this table, sipping my chai latte. And suddenly, The Joker comes on. Now, as I said, this Starbucks, for a good 40 minutes that I was there, was playing only jazz music. The Joker comes on, the song plays out, and I hear a little bit of confusion in the back, and suddenly we're playing jazz music again. I can't even tell you the biggest smile I had on my face. And as I said at the top, I have so many of these stories, so many, between songs, between her name showing up on Coke bottles and coffee cups. And when I had a horrible panic attack, I remember I pulled over on the side of the road and this gentleman called the police and the police came. This woman pulled over, got out of her car, came running over to me. She helped me up. She said, listen, you're not having a heart attack. You're okay. You're having a panic attack. And she just started hugging me. And she's hugging me and she's hugging me. And she's like, I get these. I understand it. You're going to be okay. And she's hugging me. And I said to her, thank you, and I'm crying. And the police are thanking her. And then the EMS show up and now they're trying to take me because they want to check me out. And as I'm walking away, I said to her, thank you so much for pulling over. I said, I'm Angelique. And she said, I'm Jennifer. Yeah. And I thought, of course you are. Who else would you be? Randomly on the side of the road, picking me up off the ground, hugging me and telling me everything was going to be okay. Of course your name would be Jennifer, right? All of this to say that what we ultimately grieve is what we can no longer see. And grief is simply love that can't be expressed in the same way that it has been. When we learn to express that love in a different way, in a different form, the grief begins to subside. It begins to alchemize. It begins to change into something very different and beautiful. It begins to change in this sort of co-creatorship with that spirit of your loved one. And suddenly you don't look at it as a loss. You see it very, very differently. It takes a lot of effort, a lot of faith and belief to get there. But I assure you, there are enough stories out there, books, movies, etc., that talk about these experiences that people have with those who have crossed over, enough to know that it's real. And, sometimes our friends leave us in ways that are less than stellar. So part of that is also forgiveness of self, forgiveness of them. People make a lot of choices in their lives, and those choices affect others. And sometimes that can make the grief harder because it now comes with the question of why. But we're not here to answer why. That's not our job. Our job is to find the love everywhere. Our job is to remember those people exactly as we loved them. Our job is to be grateful for the moment that we had with them, for the experiences that we got, and for the love we got to share. Because every time another human being comes into our lives and offers us an opportunity to love them and to be loved by them for however long that is the greatest gift we can ever have. Remember, friends, grief is the human side of love. It's that ache that proves how much love the heart can hold. So if right now you are grieving someone, place your hand on your heart and for a moment, close your eyes, bring them into your mind, speak to them, call their name, let them know you're listening. They are not lost. They are not gone. They have just stepped into a reality that you cannot see. Until you meet again in the same form, keep loving them. Keep telling them how much you miss them. Keep reminding them of the good times you had together because they hear you. And you heal your heart by allowing your heart to remain open and undefined by time and space. Remember, you are not alone in your grief. You are held, you are supported, and you are deeply, deeply loved. Thank you so much for joining me on Call Cut with Angelique. New episodes drop every Friday. If you like this content, please subscribe, like, share with your friends. And remember, folks, no matter what life gives you, you must always keep shining.